ICE and immigration enforcement are at the forefront of discussion for political debate here in America. Typically, immigration is sold as a security issue, but it's also a business. And many lawmakers are openly taking money from companies who profit off of increased detention. I brought on Cam, who is a correspondent with Courier, to walk us through the details and expose which representatives are taking the most money for these for profit detention centers. Cam, how you doing this morning?
Hey, I'm good, Mason. How you doing? Good to see you again.
Great. I'm really excited to talk with you about this.
Yeah, so I've been doing some research and investigation, not just into ICE warehouses and this detention industrialization complex that the United States seems to be in, but who is making money off of it. Because just like you said, it is a business, and business is booming for private prisons and for data surveillance companies that are turning the country into a very much into a police state.
Yeah, absolutely. It really seems like there's a lot of money to be made in the continued suffering of people who most often have zero violent criminal record. We know that the figures vary on who's reporting, but across the board, over 75% of people we know for sure have zero violent criminal record that are being taken from ICE. And the fact that there are people profiting off of that, it just seems so dystopian and backwards, but it's openly in front of our face, it seems.
And it's something that they were honestly banking on. They put in some investments, these companies. The ones I looked at were Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's, again, AI data surveillance company, and then Geo Group and Core Civic, which are two private prison companies. And all three of them, all three of these organizations had donated millions upon millions of dollars to different candidates through direct campaign contributions and investing in lobbying and PACs. And it has turned into a massive return on investment for them. I want to say it's around 20 to 25 million that the three in total spent during the last campaign cycle, but they've already been awarded a combined $16 billion in government contracts to open up prisons, to create new warehouses, detention centers, concentration camps, and to implement mass data surveillance, not just on people that the police are targeting, but political opponents of the Trump administration and just regular people who don't like seeing their neighbors arrested and thrown into jail without being even accused of a crime.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot of people watching that are confused on how these detention centers, like, how does the federal government determine how much revenue these detention centers get?
Well, it's a more cynical view would be based on how much money Trump got from them, is
Mm,
how much he's giving them in contracts. A lot of these are no bid, or they are just there is one bidder, which is Palantir or Geo Group. But they determine and say, well, DHS was given $45 billion, so we need to invest $15 billion in detention. And so then they give out different contracts for Geo Group and Core Civic again to open up detention centers. And so they get these contracts. They get them very fast. Their CEOs are friends with people within the administration,
mm.
and their goal. If you have to set up detention centers, which we don't, but if they're dead set on it, there's a right, humane way to detain people, and then there is the capitalist way, which is to make as much money off it as possible.
Mm.
And so let's say the government determines it's going to cost $50 million to open up a warehouse camp in Surprise, Arizona, for example. They then award the contract to Geo Group, who says, well, we want to pocket as much of this 50 billion as possible. So we could probably get, or 50 million. So we could probably get away with, instead of setting up individual beds and setting up, a sewage system so that they can use the restroom in privacy, and getting food for everyone so they have enough to eat. They set it up to just concentrate as many people into this camp as possible. And so there's, people sleeping on the floor. People are barely getting the minimum they need to survive as far as food. There's not enough restrooms in these facilities, so people are just, there's clogged toilets, there's long lines, and there's no privacy. And the companies do this because their main focus is making as much money as possible. So the government gives them this big contract saying, yeah, we need you to detain 200 people. If you want to detain them humanely, it'll cost you this much. But they don't do that. They do it to make money. And so people are treated inhumanely, and they're getting tons of money back for this.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where Doge is in all of this. Where's the Department of Government Efficiency when we're seeing contracts given in the tens of millions of dollars that's mostly being pocketed by a lot of these detention profiteers? That it make sense to me.
Well, it depends. I guess it depends on what you see as the purpose of Doge. It really turns out that Doge was more to cut out any federal investigation into any of Elon Musk's companies and fast track contracts for him personally to profit. I mean, the guy who killed USAID, he now the government spends more on security for him than we spent on USAID, which was used to make sure that children didn't starve or die of preventable diseases across the world. So I would say Doge is working exactly as intended. They
Right.
also were trying to make things more efficient by consolidating all of our data across agencies, which is just an insane breach of privacy to think that the IRS now has access, that one entity, which is essentially Palantir, has access to our tax information from the IRS. They have our savings from Social Security. They have, any criminal background on us from any jurisdiction. It is more efficient in creating a police state, but as far as saving money, that doesn't seem like that was Doge's plan at all.
Yeah, I mean, emphasis on the police state. It really feels like you can't go anywhere without a camera in your face. And now that we know that all of these cameras are working in coordination typically for these data centers, it really can create a lot of paranoia going anywhere nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's exactly why um, that's why police wear masks now, because ICE agents, border patrol agents, they don't want to be identified. They know how widespread this is, and they want to control their own narrative. So
Mm.
they wear masks and they do their own recordings so that they can create these images, and that for better for worse, it seems like one of the best ways to combat this is for like citizenry surveillance, where we have to surveil the police now because it's been proven by how many abuses and how many murders later that they're not going to surveil themselves.
Yeah, you'd think that something this dystopian or authoritarian would come from the executive branch. And a lot of it is being done by Trump and his cronies within the executive branch of government. But Congress is supposed to be there to represent the people. It's supposed to be the most democratic institution that we have within our federal system. And yet it seems like there's a lot of congressional members who are directly profiting off of these decisions. Can you walk us through some of these names of individuals in Congress who are directly profiting off of the detention of migrants?
Yeah, definitely. And just for to understand the scope of this, these are candidates who, these are Republican politicians, Democratic politicians, candidates who've been taking money from these companies for years, not
Mm.
just while Trump has been implementing his anti-immigrant agenda this past year and change, but while we were still going through insane amounts of mass incarceration over the years. People like Senator Susan Collins, who is often seen as this middle of the road, independent thinking type of person. She gets money from Geo Group, CoreCivic, from Palantir. Even as her state has been harassed by ICE, it's been up to local leadership there to stop ICE from intimidating and harassing and abducting the citizenry, because people like Susan Collins, they can't, they've already been bought. She can't risk losing those contributions for her next election cycle. And so it's beholden to the governor and mayor and local leadership there to actually step up. I will add that, for every Susan Collins, there are Democrats who are also taking this money.
Mm.
The governor and at least one of the representatives, Representative Crow in Colorado, they were found to have taken Palantir money. They once it was publicly revealed, essentially once they were shamed into it, they returned those donations and said, we're not taking any more money. We regret doing this, and we're donating this money to immigrant rights groups. But then there are other people like Senator Ruben Gallego, who during the last cycle, he took money from Palantir. And even though he is very protective of immigrants' rights and very critical of the Trump administration, as far as I know, those donations are still sitting in his bank account.
Interesting. Wow. I did not I didn't know how pervasive this issue was amongst both parties. And I think that's important to be objective over what this money is influencing in regard to policy, because nobody is taking this money just without anything in exchange. These are companies who want to continue to make profit. They don't have a charity donation that's just supposed to go to candidates that they think are altruistic. Typically, it's going to go towards representatives who they think are going to be the best in their favor when it comes to implementing policy.
Right. Now, I will say people like Senator Gallego have, again, been at the forefront of criticizing the Trump administration and standing up to this mass incarceration, anti immigrant agenda that they're beholden to. So he may have taken the money, but it doesn't seem like he's necessarily influenced, at least publicly. He has also introduced legislation to curb ICE and to stop Palantir. And so I I don't foresee him getting money from them in the future. It'd
Mm,
be nice to see if that money was going somewhere beneficial, though. And this cycle, even though Democrats and Republicans received money, Republicans by a long shot received way more money
mm,
than Democrats did this cycle. Previous cycles, it was back and forth. These companies, they don't see red or blue, they just see green. They just want to hedge their bets either way, and we're seeing that play out now, unfortunately.
mm.
Now, how that plays into the midterms it's up to the people to demand that they don't take these types of donations, just like we demand that they don't take money from super PACs or private interests. But it again, we'll have to see how that plays out in the midterms.
Yeah, we need public participation and making sure that we do choose candidates who are on the side of the people, not on the side of moneyed interests. One thing that really stood out to me that I'd love for you to shed some more light on was Representative Mike Rogers, who accepted large amount of money from private prison companies, but then had two of his staffers go to lobby on behalf of Geo Group. Can you talk about like the revolving door when it comes to government positions and then these executive lobbying roles? Like, what does that look like typically in Washington?
Well, revolving door is basically the best way to describe it. Is once people have put in their time, I guess you could call it, at Capitol Hill, either working for members of Congress or even members of Congress themselves, they build up connections, they build trust, and then they are able to almost immediately become lobbyists for whatever corporation they think they can get the most money from. I mean, Senator Rogers' staffers are a pretty solid example of of that happening parallel. Are those things happening at the same time?
Mm,
But there's also like Senator Kirsten Sinema, or the former senator from Arizona. She famously is now a lobbyist for different AI companies and is into crypto and stuff. She was pretty much universally hated by the time she left office, and now she's making tons of money as a lobbyist. And it really just speaks to just how disgusting money in politics is right now. One, that these companies can spend millions and millions of dollars to fund candidates, to build up these political action committees, and then that they can turn around and hire these politicians and say, hey, if you do a good job for me while you're in Congress, there's an even bigger paycheck waiting for you when you get out of here. And so a lot of people complain that politicians are bought on the cheap because they get these small donations, but a lot of times the real incentive is the lobbying job they get once they leave.
it's the long-term investment that they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, the way that that revolving door could be shut takes an act of Congress. And there are way too many people in Congress right now who benefit from that door or want to see the benefits from it to shut it on themselves.
So, what do you think is the solution to implementing this type of regulation? Does it have to be more pushback from the people? Does it work through mass organizing? What do you think is
It
the best solution?
It it does to an extent. Unfortunately, just because of how polarized politics are right now in the United States, um, when push comes to shove, someone who is a Trump supporter is going to vote for the Republican no matter. This isn't going to be a deal breaker for them when they're voting, just as the same as a Democrat isn't going to say, "Well, I'm going to abstain my vote for the Senate in Texas and give it to the Republican because you took these donations." So it does have a certain effect. There are certain politicians who don't take that money. Mark Kelly, again, a lot of Arizona examples today, but he's a really good example of someone who hasn't taken money from private companies, from PACs, large donations anyway. So it takes, if we're looking for a solution from the people, it would take candidates like Mark Kelly to step up and run for office and honor their commitment. If we're looking for something more assertive, there are ways that state laws can prohibit certain things. There are states that prevent dark money from going into politics, or they require transparency in certain areas, or they have limits on how long state politicians can become lobbyists. They can't restrict what Congress does while they're in Congress, but there could be state laws to prevent them from becoming lobbyists after they leave Congress, or from preventing lobbying firms from hiring politicians for a certain amount of time.
Mm.
Now, that would take advocates at the state level to make those changes, but that would probably be a more efficient way in the short term than trying to lobby all of Congress.
Well, thanks again for coming on, Cam. I appreciate you going over all those details into how corrupt this revolving door seems to be. It really is disheartening when the companies that profit from detention are influencing the lawmakers who are deciding what detention policy looks like in this country. It's really not a matter of what the system is doing, but who the system is built for. And we need to make sure that people are aware of how pervasive this level of corruption is, so that way they can claw back power from a system right now who doesn't really represent them.
No, no problem. I mean, it's this sort of thing that people just need to be aware of because, like you said, as it permeates and as it becomes common knowledge, that's when we can see and enact real change. Thanks for having me on. If anyone wants to catch me later on this week, I'll be at the State of the Swamp. It's a rebuttal to the State of the Union that the president is giving on Tuesday. The State of the Swamp rebuttal is streaming at defiance.org. You can check that out for free, or there's some paid options if you want to support what Defiance is doing.